when I confronted my parents about their lies. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My mother looked me in the eye and said, "That's not your real father." People always think I'm exaggerating when I start there, like I'm trying to make my life sound more dramatic for the internet. I wish I were. I'm Alex, I'm 28. I rent a one-bedroom apartment above a noisy pizza place, and I grew up hearing one sentence more than any other. We may not be rich, but at least we're honest. That was my parents' whole brand. Diane and Mark, the couple who did everything the right way. No divorces, no affairs, no credit cards, no secrets. We went to the same small church every Sunday, volunteered at the food pantry, hosted Thanksgiving for relatives whose lives were supposedly messy. My mom would pour coffee and smile too widely and say things like, "They mean well, but you know us. We're the only honest people we know." There were rules in our house like commandments carved into stone. No locked doors, no private phones, no secrets between family. If I cried and didn't want to explain why, my mom would stand in my doorway until I talked. If I ever said, "It's personal," she'd snap back, "Nothing is personal in this family. Secrets destroy families." My dad played the good cop to her lie detector. He'd ruffle my hair and say, "Your mom just wants to protect you, kiddo. In this world, truth is all you've got." The way he said it made it sound noble, like our uncomfortable family meetings were some sort of moral training. So I grew up believing we were better than other families, even when it didn't feel good. When friends complained about divorced parents or money problems or lies, I'd think, at least my parents are honest, at least I know who I am, where I come from, what we stand for. That belief held me together longer than I want to admit. It shaped who I dated, what I studied, even the job I chose. I wanted to be the kind of person my parents said they were. It was still there the night I came home unexpectedly and stopped in the dark hallway, hearing my parents arguing in the kitchen about me. Then I heard my name and the words, "The truth." I didn't walk into the kitchen that night. I just stood there, listening to my own heartbeat in my ears, until a cabinet slammed and my father's voice dropped to a low hiss I'd never heard before. I backed away like a coward, crept upstairs, and pretended it had never happened. If that sounds ridiculous, you have to understand how powerful the myth of my family was. Growing up, my parents talked about honesty the way other families talked about sports teams. My mom would say, "Other people lie because they're weak, Alex. We're not like that." If I so much as exaggerated a story from school, she'd make me repeat it without the performance. My dad would joke, "The truth may hurt, but at least it doesn't get you grounded twice." We had family nights where other kids played board games. We did check-ins. Mom would ask, "Is there anything you're keeping from us? Anything we need to know?" She framed it as safety, but it always felt like a police interrogation softened with homemade cookies. I learned early that there was no such thing as a harmless secret. Even our house matched the story. No clutter on counters, photos perfectly straight, matching mugs lined up like soldiers. We weren't rich, but everything looked deliberate, controlled. My mom called it living with integrity. My dad called it not letting life get sloppy. If a relative mentioned some scandal in their own family, my dad would shake his head and say, "That's what happens when people start hiding things. We don't do secrets." Emily and I would sit there, silently absorbing the lesson. The older I got, the more I molded myself around that idea. I didn't drink in high school, didn't sneak out, didn't date anyone my parents would disapprove of. I told them everything, at least everything that mattered to me. I thought that earned me the right to ask questions back. By then, I was 27 and thought I knew our history. Everything changed when one innocent question about our family tree enraged her. The question that set her off wasn't even dramatic. It was a Sunday afternoon, dishes stacked neatly, my dad snoring through a football game on low volume. I was helping Mom sort through an old box of photos for a church slideshow, flipping past baby pictures and awkward tween braces. "Hey," I said, holding up a faded hospital photo labeled in my mom's careful handwriting. "Alexander James, July 14th, 93. Why does this one say St. Mary's? I thought you always said I was born at County General." Her hand froze mid-reach. "What? Look," I laughed, because it seemed funny. "You've told the County General story a million times. With the power outage and the nurse who fainted? But this says St. Mary's." For a second, the room went too quiet. The TV murmured in the background, My dad's snore hitched, and my mom's face did something I couldn't read. Then it smoothed out so fast it was like a glitch. You misheard, she said. I've always said St. Mary's. Your memory's dramatic, Alex. I frowned. No, you haven't. You tell the power outage story every year on my birthday. You even said it was a miracle they didn't lose any of the babies. She snatched the photo out of my hand with more force than necessary. Are you accusing me of lying about your birth now? Is that where we are? I blinked. What? No, I'm just confused. Well, stop being confused, she snapped. Some of us are trying to get things done instead of picking fights. She shoved the photo back into the box, out of order, which was its own alarm bell. My mother did not do out of order. The rest of the afternoon passed in brittle small talk, like we were strangers trapped at the same table. That night, lying in my old bedroom, I replayed her expression on a loop. There had been fear there, not annoyance. Fear, and something like anger that I'd noticed the tiniest crack in her perfect story. Sometime after midnight, I got up to get water and heard my parents in the hallway outside their room, their voices low and tense. I heard her hiss. He cannot start digging into this, Mark. I told myself it was nothing. Parents argue. People misspeak. Maybe my mom had mixed up hospitals over the years, or maybe I had. That was my first instinct. Assume I was wrong. Not the two people who had built their entire personality on being right about the truth. But once you see a hairline crack, you start noticing all the places the paint doesn't quite match. It started small. At brunch a week later, my dad told my aunt a story about how we struggled when the kids were little, but we never took a dime from anyone. I'd heard a different version growing up, how grandma had helped with rent when dad got laid off. When I mentioned that, he laughed it off. You kids remember everything wrong, he said, winking at Emily. Selective memory, huh? Emily laughed automatically. I didn't. Then there were the ages. My mom always said she and my dad had been married for 30 solid years, no breaks, no separations. But the framed wedding photo in the hallway had a date printed in the corner that didn't line up with their anniversary. 2 years off. When I asked, she said, too quickly, the photographer mislabeled it. He was sloppy. Individually, they were nothing. Together, they felt like static building under my skin. The hard contradiction landed on a Wednesday when I stopped by their house on my lunch break. Mom was at the church, Dad was in the garage, and I went looking for a stapler in the home office. The filing cabinet was slightly open. Growing up, that cabinet was the holy of holies. Off limits, adult business, guarded like a dragon horde. Now it was gaping like a mouth inviting me in. I meant to find a stapler. Instead, I pulled open the top drawer, pushed aside a stack of old utilities, and saw my own name on a crisp, official envelope. My hands were sweaty when I unfolded the certificate, heart pounding so loudly I barely heard the lawnmower start outside. Every line was familiar, my full name, my birthday, my mother's information. Under father, it listed a name I had never heard. I stared at that name so long the letters stopped meaning anything. It wasn't Mark James. It wasn't even James as a last name. It was some stranger, Luke Harper, age 32 at the time of my birth. Father, Luke Harper. Mother, Diane Miller. For a second, I honestly thought it was a typo. Maybe they'd printed the wrong form. Maybe there was another Alexander out there whose life I was flipping through by mistake. The alternative, that my entire existence had been misrepresented, was too big to hold. I stuffed the certificate back into the envelope, slid everything exactly where I'd found it, and walked out of the office on autopilot. My dad waved from the driveway, oil on his hands, totally unaware that on paper, he was no one to me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Luke Harper's name in block letters. By 3 a.m, I was pacing my apartment, phone in hand, debating who to call. I started with Emily. She answered on the third ring, groggy. Alex, do you know what time it is? I found something at Mom and Dad's, I said, voice shaking. About me. About Dad. Instantly, she sounded more awake. Did something happen? Is he okay? He's fine, I said. At least physically. Have you ever heard the name Luke Harper? Silence. Not the confused kind, the calculating kind. No, she said finally. Why? I told her about the birth certificate, rushing, apologizing, circling back, trying to make it sound as neutral as possible. When I was done, there was another long silence. You shouldn't have been snooping in their files, she said quietly. Emily, they raised you, she snapped. Whatever some piece of paper says, dad is dad. Don't start something you can't take back. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone until my thumbs moved on their own. I texted the only other person who'd ever hinted that my parents weren't perfect, Aunt Rosa, my mom's older sister. That was the moment I realized she wasn't surprised. She was afraid. Rosa texted back faster than Emily had picked up. Sure, Mijo. Coffee tomorrow. Usual place? She was the only one who called me Mijo, leftover from when my grandparents still slipped into Spanish around us. My parents said ethnic labels made things complicated, but Rosa never cared. We met at a quiet coffee shop near my work, the kind with plants in mismatched pots and a tip jar labeled college/emotional support. She had a to-go cup already, lipstick mark perfectly centered on the lid. When she saw me, her smile faltered. You look like you haven't slept, she said, standing to hug me. She smelled like the same floral perfume she'd worn my whole childhood. What's going on? I didn't know how to ease into it, so I didn't. I slid a photo of the birth certificate across the table the way people in movies slide blackmail photos. Aunt Rosa. I said, who was Luke Harper? Her eyes flicked down, then back up to my face. In that 1 second, I saw 30 years of family politics slam into place behind her pupils. Where did you get this? She whispered. From Mom and Dad's filing cabinet. Please just answer me. She exhaled slowly, pinching the bridge of her nose. Your mother told me she'd taken care of this. That you'd never see anything. Taken care of what? Rosa, is Mark my father or not? She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She reached into her purse, fumbled with a worn leather wallet, and pulled out something folded so many times the creases were soft. Her hands shook as she unfolded it, like even the paper knew it carried weight. It was a photocopy of an old legal form, petition for termination of parental rights. At the top, in clunky typewriter letters, was Luke Harper's name. Underneath, in darker ink, was my mother's signature from 28 years ago. I could feel my pulse in my teeth as the room narrowed around us today. Your mom will never forgive me, Rosa murmured softly. But you deserve to know why they're so scared of the truth. Rosa didn't dump everything at once. She unspooled it slowly, like a thread she wasn't sure wouldn't strangle both of us. Luke was impulsive, she said, staring into her coffee. Your mom met him before Mark. He was exciting, charming, but unstable. Drinking, stupid decisions. When she got pregnant, he promised he'd get his life together. He didn't. So she left him, I said numbly. She ran, Rosa corrected. He scared her. There were fights. The cops were called once. Our parents pushed her to start over with someone better. That someone was Mark. I swallowed, trying to reconcile the image of my composed, judgmental mother with a younger woman terrified enough to petition a court to erase a man. Did Mark know she was pregnant when they met? Rosa hesitated. Yes, he agreed to raise you as his own. But there were conditions. No contact from Luke. Clean break. They moved, changed churches, even cut off some cousins who knew too much. And no one thought I should know who my actual father was. My voice came out sharper than I intended. She winced. Your mom said telling you would only confuse you. She said, we're building something honest here, Rosa. We can't keep reopening old wounds. Honest. The word made me dizzy. Does Luke know about me? I asked. He did, then, she said. After the termination, he tried to fight it, but he was a mess. Last I heard, he left the state. I don't know where he is now, or if he's even alive. The coffee shop noise faded into a dull hum. For 28 years, my parents had let me believe my life was clean, simple, untouched by chaos. In reality, they'd edited it like a PR campaign. On my way home, I pulled over in a random parking lot, opened my laptop, and searched Luke Harper arrest records with shaking hands. There were dozens of results, old and new, scattered across different states. Each headline felt like a possible future someone had decided I didn't need to know. The first result was a mugshot that looked disturbingly like my own face. I clicked on the mugshot before I could talk myself out of it. The photo was 15 years old, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Same nose, same stubborn jaw, same tired eyes. The caption read, Luke A. Harper arrested on charges of fraud, identity theft. My stomach dropped. I scrolled. There were older records, DUIs, disorderly conduct, a domestic disturbance that made my chest tighten. Newer ones, too. Probation violations, skipped court dates. Luke Harper was not just a bad boyfriend my mother had escaped. He was a walking red flag. I should have closed the laptop. Instead, I kept going, cobbling together a life from public records and half-archived news blurbs. He'd bounced between states, used different addresses, and once applied for a business license under a slightly different spelling of his name. Every time his life almost stabilized, there was another arrest, another eviction. And threaded through some of the older articles were tiny details that punched through me like ice. References to his young son, complaints about child support he claims is unfair, a quote from a neighbor who said, he talked about wanting to see his boy, but the mother wouldn't let him. I sat back, breathing too fast. All my life, my parents had told me that our family was honest, stable, safe, because they made good choices. But somewhere out there was a man with my face whose worst choices had been quietly scrubbed out of my story. The mini twist, if you want to call it that, wasn't just that Mark wasn't my biological father. It was that the man who had spent years trying and failing to claw his way back into a life that included me. They hadn't just hidden his name. They'd hidden an entire legal war over my existence. I slammed the laptop shut when my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. Family dinner Sunday, 6 o'clock. Be on time. We need to talk. My chest tightened with the sense that my investigation had already leaked. I stared at the words, realizing they might be about more than my schedule. By Sunday, I had a folder on my laptop labeled medical receipts that was anything but. Inside were screenshots of court dockets, PDF downloads of Luke Harper's charges, copies of my birth certificate, and the termination petition Rosa had let me scan. I'd even ordered an inexpensive mail-in DNA test, the kind advertised between true crime podcasts and home security systems. It felt surreal, investigating my own life like a case file. The moral hangover was real, too. Every time I dragged another document into the folder, I heard my mother's voice. Secrets destroy families, Alex. I was the one keeping secrets now. I told myself the difference was that mine were temporary, aimed at getting to the truth, not burying it. Still, when I caught my reflection in the dark laptop screen, I barely recognized the person staring back. I called Rosa again. Do you think I should just confront them? I asked. Lay it all out, force the conversation. She was quiet for a long moment. If you go in half prepared, they'll gaslight you, she said finally. They've been rewriting this story for almost 30 years. You need facts they can't wave away. I have facts, I said, rubbing my eyes. I have documents. I have Luke's records. You have pieces, she corrected gently. You don't know why they made the choices they did, or what they'll do if this comes out. Think about consequences, Mijo. Consequences. My mind jumped to Emily, our holiday traditions, the tenuous peace we still had. If I blew this open, there was no putting it back. Part of me wanted to keep the illusion and just quietly adjust my expectations of my parents. Another part of me, the part that had spent years being interrogated about tiny omissions, wanted them to feel what it was like to sit under a spotlight. So I started printing things out, sliding them into a plain black folder, the kind my dad used for church budgets and tax meetings. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was building a mirror. I decided the family dinner would become my courtroom, not theirs. Sunday came too fast. I spent the afternoon pacing my apartment, black folder on the coffee table like a live grenade. Part of me hoped something would happen, a snowstorm in June, a sudden emergency at work, that would give me an excuse to stay home. Instead, 6 o'clock found me pulling into my parents' perfectly edged driveway, the same fake rock still hiding the spare key, the same porch light with a tiny crack in the glass. Normalcy, weaponized. When I stepped inside, the house smelled like roast chicken and lemon cleaner. My mom believed anything could be fixed with the right scent. You're late, she called from the kitchen, even though I was exactly on time. My dad emerged from the living room and clapped a hand on my shoulder. There he is, he said too loudly. Our truth teller. How's life above the pizza place? I tensed. Fine. He squeezed my shoulder harder than necessary and lowered his voice. Your mother's on edge. Don't start any debates tonight, okay? We just want a nice family dinner. There it was, the preemptive warning. They knew something was off. Maybe Emily had said more than she admitted. Maybe they'd noticed the file cabinet slightly ajar. Either way, The dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the only one waiting for a shoe to drop. At the table, Emily barely met my eyes. My mom kept the conversation surface level. Neighborhood gossip, church announcements, the pastor's new sermon series on forgiveness. The word landed between us like a dare. Halfway through the meal, my mom set down her fork and folded her hands. "We asked you here because we feel some distance," she said, voice silky. "You've been secretive lately, Alex. Is there something you want to tell us?" My dad watched me closely, his smile just a little too tight, like he was ready to pounce on any wrong answer. Emily's foot tapped under the table, rapid and anxious, matching the thud of my own heart tonight. For a second, I almost apologized for sins I hadn't committed. Instead of apologizing, I heard myself say, "Yeah, there is something." 3 sets of eyes snapped to me. My mom's expression tightened, like a mask setting. "Go on," she said. My hands shook as I reached down and pulled the black folder onto my lap. It felt absurdly heavy for a few sheets of paper and some printouts. "Before I say anything," I began, "I need you to understand that I didn't go looking for this. I stumbled onto it. And once I did, I couldn't unsee it." "Alex," my dad warned, voice low. "What are you talking about?" The doorbell rang. My mom frowned. "Who?" "Emily. Did you invite someone?" Emily looked as startled as I felt. "No." I swallowed. "I did." Diane shot me a look that could have peeled paint. "Alex, this is family business." "Exactly," I said, standing. "And Aunt Rosa is family." Rosa stepped into the dining room a moment later, clutching her purse like a shield. My mom went pale. "Rosa," she breathed. "What are you doing here?" "You told me to stay out of it," Rosa said quietly. "But you also told me we were a family that valued truth. I'm here to listen." For a second, I thought my mother might actually throw her out. Instead, she forced a smile so strained it looked painful. "Fine," she said. "If this is some sort of intervention, let's get it over with." I sat back down, opened the folder, and laid the birth certificate on the table between the salt and pepper shakers. "This is where we start," I said, my voice shaking but loud. "With the fact that Mark James is not listed as my father." Emily sucked in a breath. My dad's chair scraped against the floor as he leaned forward. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. "From your filing cabinet," I said. "From the drawer you always said was full of boring bills." Funny thing, it also had my identity in it. My mother's hand twitched toward the paper, then paused mid-air, fingers curling. "You had no right," she whispered. The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming as I turned another page. I turned the page to the termination petition with trembling fingers. The termination petition landed on the table like a gavel. "Petitioner, Diane Miller," I read aloud, my voice steadier than I felt. "Respondent, Luke A. Harper. Request, termination of parental rights regarding minor child, Alexander James." "Stop," my mother snapped. "You don't understand." "Then explain it," I said. "Because as far as I can tell, my entire life has been built on a story you curated and sold to me as truth." My dad glared at Rosa. "You had one job," he hissed. "Stay out of it." Rosa lifted her chin. "My job is to love my nephew," she said, "even when you don't trust him with his own history." Emily finally spoke, voice cracking. "Mom, Dad, is any of this real? Is Luke?" "Luke is nothing," my father exploded, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to rattle the water glasses. "He was a drunk and a criminal who tried to drag your mother down with him." I stepped up. "I saved this family." "By lying to me for 28 years?" I asked. My mom's eyes shone with angry tears. "We didn't lie," she insisted. "We protected you. You were a baby, Alex. You needed stability, not some loser who would show up drunk to custody hearings. Mark is your father in every way that matters." "You told me secrets destroy families," I said. "You made me confess every stupid crush, every mistake. And the whole time, you were hiding an entire man." My dad pointed a finger at me. "Watch your tone. You have no idea what we went through. The restraining orders, the threats." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me everything. Tell me why you cut me off from my own blood and then preached honesty like a religion." My mother laughed then, a short, broken sound that didn't match her face. "You think this was easy for us?" she said. "Every time you looked in the mirror and I saw him, I wondered if I'd made a horrible mistake." For a long moment, my mother stared at the papers, shoulders quaking. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "We lied," she whispered, "because we were terrified of the person you might have become." You'd think that confession would make everything click neatly into place. It didn't. It exploded the room. Emily burst into tears. "You thought he'd turn out like Luke?" she screamed. "So you just decided he never needed to know anything?" "It worked," my dad shot back. "Look at him. College degree, steady job, no police record. We did our job." "Your job was to love me, not rewrite me," I said. Voices overlapped. Rosa trying to calm Emily, my mother insisting they'd sacrificed everything for me, my father demanding gratitude like it was unpaid rent. Years of unspoken resentment poured out. The strict rules, the surveillance, the way any pushback was labeled disrespectful. At some point, my mom said the quiet part out loud. "If you'd known where you came from," she snapped, "you might have used it as an excuse." "I can't help it, Mom. I'm just like him." "So you lied about who I was," I said, numb, "to control who I became." No one answered that. By the end of the night, Rosa had left in tears. Emily had locked herself in her old bedroom, and my parents were holed up in their room with the papers I'd brought. I walked out carrying nothing but my car keys and the hollow certainty that I couldn't keep pretending this was a normal family. The next week was a blur of half-hearted texts and missed calls. My mom sent paragraphs about context and forgiveness. My dad sent a single line: "We're done discussing this. Drop it or don't come back." I showed the messages to Dr. King, the therapist Rosa referred me to, sitting on a soft couch that didn't squeak judgment. "This isn't just about Luke," she said calmly. "It's about control. What do you want to do with the truth now that you have it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "If I reach out, I might open a door to more chaos. If I don't, I'm choosing the same lie they did." Dr. King nodded. "Either way, you're allowed to choose based on who you are now, not who they feared you'd be." That night, my cursor blinked over Luke Harper's last known address. In the end, I didn't drive to the address I found. It was 3 states away, and every article about Luke's arrest screamed chaos. Instead, I wrote him a letter I never mailed. I told him my name. I told him I knew who he was, and that I wasn't ready for contact, but I also wasn't willing to pretend he'd never existed. I folded the letter, sealed it, and tucked it into the same black folder as the court papers. Proof, for myself, that I hadn't hidden from the truth, just chosen how to hold it. With my parents, the boundaries had to be less symbolic and more brutal. I texted them both a long message, written with Dr. King's help. I told them I loved them, that I appreciated the ways they'd shown up for me, and that their fear didn't erase those things. But I also told them I couldn't keep pretending their choices were harmless. I wrote, "I will not lie about my own life to protect your reputation. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be based on reality." My mom responded within minutes, "You're being dramatic. Families are complicated. You're airing dirty laundry that doesn't need to be aired." My dad took longer. When his text finally came, it was short. "If you talk about this outside the family, don't come back." So I didn't. I stopped going over every Sunday. I skipped a couple of church services. When people asked, I said, "I'm taking space from my parents right now," and let the silence do the rest. Emily called me crying more than once, torn between loyalty to them and understanding of me. "Can't you just let it go?" she asked one night. "I can forgive them eventually," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. "But I'm not going to forget on command." Instead of planning around their traditions, I started small ones of my own. Takeout with friends, quiet evenings reading, a cheap fake tree in my apartment that didn't match anyone's expectations. My first holiday without their script loomed ahead like a terrifying blank page. Here's the part people always ask about. Did things get better? The short answer is, not in the neat, movie way. My parents didn't suddenly apologize and attend joint therapy holding hands. They stayed defensive. For a long time, every text from my mom contained some mix of guilt and scripture. Every message from my dad was either stony silence or another warning not to drag our name through the mud. But something did get better me. In therapy, I started unpacking how much of my identity had been built as a reaction to their fear. I wasn't just the good kid. I was the kid they were constantly measuring against a ghost named Luke. Realizing that felt like taking off a jacket I didn't know I'd been wearing in August heat. I kept some boundaries firm. I told my parents they could have a relationship with me if they could talk about what happened without calling it protection. Sometimes they managed a stilted phone call about work or the weather. Sometimes months went by without contact. I stopped chasing them. Emily and I met for coffee more often. She was still angry with me for blowing up the family, but she was also angry with them. One afternoon, she admitted she'd always felt like there were rules no one explained to her. At least now I know why everything was so tense, she said, stirring her drink. It wasn't us. It was the secret. That Christmas, I framed a new photo for my apartment wall. Me, Rosa, and Emily on my sagging thrift store couch, holding mismatched mugs, laughing at something stupid. No matching outfits, no perfect angles, no curated narrative. Just three people trying to tell the truth with each other, one clumsy conversation at a time. If you're watching this and you feel that itch, that sense that something in your family story doesn't add up, here's what I learned. You don't owe anyone your confusion. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to step back until the answers are honest.